their phone rings and they see it's David Bourne calling. I'm doing the work to vet it for them, and I'm only coming to you with an opportunity that I believe you'll be really interested in.
Hello, I'm Bruce Berman, host of Understanding IP Matters, the acclaimed series that provides leading innovators and experts the space to share their IP story, the good, the bad, and the incredible. Character licensing is everywhere, and it's based on intellectual property. The Marvel superhero on your coffee mug, the Disney pajamas your kids wear, that character in a memorable Super Bowl ad. Most people experience licensing dozens of times a day, but have no idea it exists as part of a $370 billion global industry. I am pleased to have as my guest today David Bourne, the wonderkind of character licensing, who is an expert in realizing intellectual property value by leveraging positive brand recognition. David is CEO of Bourne Licensing and produces the Born to License podcast, an excellent one, by the way. He is not a lawyer, but a lifelong purveyor of iconic movie and toy characters and their value. He is also adept at matching the right IP with the right marketing campaign. A committed overachiever, David is currently living in Brazil, will be moving to LA shortly, ran a marathon in Amsterdam this past fall, I believe, and recently climbed to Everest Base Camp. Good morning, David. It's great to have you on the podcast today. I was glad we could grab you.
Good morning, Brett. Well, thank you so much for having me. And what an introduction. I kind of think of all of that and think, wow, that is somewhat impressive. But for the record, I did run 2 marathons last year. The recent Rotterdam marathon, I had to pull out a week before because I had a foot injury, which was disappointing. I basically had to choose between doing the marathon, doing a 3rd marathon, and going to Mount Everest Base Camp. My doctor said, you can't do both, you have to do one. And I thought, I've already ran 2 marathons, so I'm going to base camp. So that's what I did.
Great. Let's get right into it. So how did character licensing become such a huge industry, and how did it enter your life?
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate to have been in the licensing world for almost 20 years now. And my story is very similar to a lot of other people in licensing in that I fell into licensing. I remember it was about 20 years ago and I was 20 years old and I wasn't really sure what to do with my career. I was in a job that I didn't really like. And I decided to just send my application, my resume to a lot of different companies. And one was called Haven Licensing in Melbourne, Australia. I got a call for the interview and I remember walking up to the building and standing at the front door and there was a big SpongeBob SquarePants looking back at me. And when I entered reception, there was a Spider-Man on the wall and Dora the Explorer plush over here. And I was very confused. I didn't know, am I in a toy store? Am I at the job interview? Am I at the right place? But that was my entry into licensing. I was very lucky to be given the job. I remember the person interviewing me started asking me questions about licensing, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I winged the interview, managed to get the job, and then I started to experience what licensing was all about. So I've been doing that for 20 years now, and it is such an exciting industry to be a part of because it has a lot of different touch points: entertainment, retail, consumer products, e-commerce, advertising. As you mentioned at the start, Bruce, with the introduction, is licensing is everywhere. That's one of my catchphrases, and it's everywhere you look, whether it's in your wardrobe, your refrigerator, at your local supermarket, and a lot of people don't know that it exists.
Were you a movie fan or a TV fan in particular growing up? Did you remember these characters, or did you really learn about them as you started to work in the industry?
I was a big fan of characters when I was a kid. I loved watching Nickelodeon cartoons, loved watching Disney. I was a big fan of entertainment before I came into licensing. And I feel like that passion for entertainment has just made working in licensing so much more of a joy because it's something that I enjoy on a daily basis.
Followers of Understanding IP Matters include entrepreneurs, content creators, inventors, investors, lawyers, educators, policymakers, all of whom are interested in capturing the value of intellectual property and encouraging better awareness on the part of businesses, creators, and investors. And that's part of what you do. You work with IP owners and advertising agencies to utilize licensing in marketing campaigns. brands can incorporate well-known characters into their advertising strategies that provide instant recognition and positive associations. Are these primarily copyright and trademark deals that you're doing, or what are they based on?
A lot of the licensing agreements we sign in the advertising space can be quite different. So an advertiser or the ad agency might come to us and they'll say, we would like to do a campaign around Cookie Monster, for example, or Batman or so forth. And so our responsibility is to essentially go to the rights holders, to the licensors, and work through that process, help them understand the creative, help them understand kind of what budget is available, the timing, and so forth. That's the most obvious part of the advertising space, is getting a character and putting it in an ad. But there's actually a lot of different other ways that IP can be licensed in advertising. For example, you can use existing footage from a clip. Say a really famous clip from The Wizard of Oz can be used in advertising as well. You can use thematic elements. So it could be recreating a really famous scene from a film. For example, Thelma and Louise, with Thelma and Louise sort of driving off into the sunset and that iconic cliff jump.
I think I've seen that one.
Yes, yeah. We've done one of those as well. And then there's also, we did a really, really interesting campaign with Asda supermarkets in the UK a few years ago for their big Christmas campaign. And it was with Buddy the Elf, the really famous character, everyone's favorite Christmas character. He essentially came back and appeared in an Asda store. But what was most interesting is that Will Ferrell didn't even have to get out of bed for it, because they rotoscoped Buddy the Elf out of the original film and placed him in an Asda supermarket. So there's all these really creative ways that you can use IP and characters in advertising.
Now, to structure licensing deals of the nature that you do, you need to value the assets. How do you typically do that? How do you know going in, like, what to charge for something?
Yeah, a lot of it is to do with the scope. So one of the questions that we ask an ad agency or a brand that comes to us and says they want to do an advertising campaign with IP or with a character is we ask them for the scope. So we say, what will the term be? Will you be using it for 12 months? What markets will it be? Will it be in the US? Will it be in all of North America? Will it be a global campaign? What will the materials be? Will it be a 60-second ad that's going on TV? Will it be online only? What other media will there be? Will there be out of home, billboards and so forth? All of that kind of stuff is how the rights holders determine kind of what value they should be putting on it. Now, some licensors have benchmarks where they will say, look, we will not allow our characters to be used unless you reach this certain level of a license fee. Otherwise, we're not interested. Others, have an appetite to really be in this space, and they actually see it more of a marketing opportunity for their brand as well. So they love to see their character in an advertising campaign because it gets in front of a lot of people.
It can be a win-win for a major character because they're getting revenue and they're also extending the brand in some way.
Yeah. We had an example, a really good example we did with Geico in the US, where they licensed Angry Birds, and it was a really, really fun campaign. And Rovio, who are the owners of Angry Birds, they really loved that they were involved with this because sales of games and users of games spiked whenever that went on TV. So there was this, it was serving another purpose outside of them, getting a license fee for lending their IP in an ad campaign. It was actually benefiting the game side of things as well. So that was a real benefit for them too.
Interesting. So how do you measure success? Is that not your purview? Is that the client's, or do you have some kind of KPI or some kind of criteria to measure if it's a successful campaign or not?
Yeah, usually that would sit with the ad agency or the brand. They will always have kind of like their KPIs of what they're trying to achieve. We usually get a sense of how successful it is based on results from kind of like, for example, there's System 1, which is a platform that measures how successful a campaign is or how certain KPIs are met from audience measurements and so forth, and how effective an ad campaign essentially is. And so often we can see that and look at that and see that it has been a success. Most of the time, the agency and the client are trying to meet KPIs that they don't necessarily share with us. A good way for us to also determine if it's successful is just hear what are the fans saying.
Right.
That's something that's really important. And this is a really good point, actually, Bruce, because with character licensing, you have to be really careful. You have to make sure that the creative is really authentic, because there's nothing worse than putting something out there and fans come after you and saying, Batman wouldn't say that, or that's not what this character would say, or this character has sold out for this brand, they've sold out for this ad campaign. So you've got to have a look out and make sure that when you're looking for feedback, you look on YouTube, you're looking on social media, what are people saying? And I find that the best case studies that we have is when the everyday person on YouTube and on social media is saying, oh, I love it. I loved seeing this character. I hadn't seen this character for a while. I hadn't seen this character in this particular context. And they get really excited about it.
Interesting. You're representing mostly licensors or licensees or both?
It's a bit of both, to be honest. We have a few different business areas. So the advertising area I've been speaking about is our Born licensing business. We have separate to that, we have a division called Born to License, where we work with physical products and we work with companies that want to license IP on their physical product. That side of our company is called Born to License, and we essentially represent and work for the licensee. So we've got over 35 clients in a whole bunch of different categories where we go and negotiate deals with Disney, with Warner Brothers, with Paramount, with Hello Kitty, with Hasbro, Mattel, and so forth, and help them with the process from start to finish.
Interesting. So how is Born Licensing compensated for representing a licensor? Is it on a project basis or a percentage success basis, or how is that typically structured without giving away any state secrets,
Yeah, when we represent the licensor, it's very typical kind of agency agreement where it's a commission based. So we represent the licensor, we go and sign deals, and they pay us a commission from the deal that's been agreed in advance. For the Born to License side of the business, we essentially represent the licensee and manage there. We have an ongoing retainer to kind of keep the lights on. We have a really big team, so that's important. But then we're also paid a commission based on the licenses that we sign on their behalf as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Depending on who you're representing or working on behalf of, what are the major differences between, say, licensing a Disney or a Marvel character for them as opposed to, say, licensing a less well-known character for someone else? There's a different scale there. Of course, everyone wants the Disney and Marvel character, but maybe less so. You have to kind of sell them on a lesser character, perhaps. How do licensees determine the right ROI, number one? And is there a sweet spot on known characters that may not be at the peak of their value curve? So not SpongeBob SquarePants or Bluey, because they're really hot, but maybe someone lesser, and maybe that provides better value for a licensee. Do you get into those kind of issues?
Oh, all the time. Absolutely. And you're right. There are some properties, some characters right now that are just constantly, people are asking, it doesn't matter what area of our business, whether it's the advertising side or the consumer product side, the name Bluey is coming up all the time. Hello Kitty's coming up all the time. Barbie's coming up all the time. A new one that's come through, K-pop Demon Hunters, that's Netflix. That's kind of like the darling of licensing right now. And it's really, really hot. So everybody's knocking on Netflix's door wanting to have the K-pop Demon Hunters. So I think the licensors that have a really hot property, it's a great situation to have, but it's a problem because everyone's knocking on their door and they have to determine where should they be spending their time? Where are they going to get the best return on investment working with this company, this company, this company? And that's part of our job, is that we essentially need to go to them and help them really understand the opportunity and that it will be worth their while. Now, there are other licensors out there with maybe lesser known brands, or maybe they're characters that haven't been in the spotlight for a little while and they're wanting to get their character out there. And usually they'll be much more open. They'll give you more time. You'll have to jump through less hoops to get a license with that character. Usually it might be a more reasonable commercial terms. They might partner in more ways, support you more. If we have somebody that's new to licensing, those are the characters that we're sort of suggesting first, because the big licensors, they typically don't like to work with a company that's never done licensing before, because it's a much heavier lift working with somebody that hasn't done licensing before. And so they prefer to tell them, go and try licensing with someone else. Once you've done a good job with it, come back to us, prove that you can respect IP and launch great licensed products, and then we'll talk.
Yeah. Brands are very protective, and they should be, of their franchise. I worked with a fellow named Del Ferrano. He was president of Sony Signatures. They did a lot of brand licensing. He represented the Beatles, Godzilla, Madonna, World Cup soccer, all sorts of things. And he said to me, Bruce, on a given week, I get 50 offers, found money for the Beatles. Why should they say no? Because it's just going to be more income. They don't have to do anything except sign a release. But I refuse 49 of them because it's not good for the brand. I'm very brand conscious, very brand equity conscious. So the biggest brands, the most lucrative ones, are very careful about their reputation and how they use their likenesses and et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't matter if it's the advertising side or the consumer product side. There are very layered processes for approvals. So that's the other thing that a lot of the licensors are considering, is their resource. And licensing teams are less and less resource these days. It's a real problem. So what they are looking at is that not only are they thinking about, is this opportunity a good brand fit, but they're also thinking like, should we be spending time with this company instead of another company? Because particularly the product development process, when you're talking about a physical product, you need to submit concepts, you need to submit pre-production samples, production samples, and that can be over many, many, many months. And if that does not go well, it can be a real painful process for a licensor. The big licensing companies are dealing with thousands and thousands of submissions on a daily basis. And so it does really start to become a resource issue, particularly when you've got a lot of consolidation happening in our industry right now, and they just have to be extremely selective with who they're going to be spending time with.
Yeah. It's a real conundrum, or challenge at least. David, I don't believe you have any formal legal training. Is that an impediment or a strength in negotiating deals? Alan Klein, the infamous Beatles and Rolling Stones manager, was an accountant who couldn't pass the CPA exam, but he did extraordinary work for them. He wasn't a lawyer, but he could structure deals. What do you find?
Yeah, I mean, what I will tell you is that I've seen thousands of licensing agreements in my time, and I can read a licensing agreement and understand what it means very, very easily. But you're right, I don't have a legal background. So often when we have a client that has questions that go sort of beyond typical commercial terms that we can provide guidance with, I always encourage them to seek advice from an IP lawyer, which is usually fine. We don't have to do any contract drafting or anything like that. The licensor will typically always do the contract draft. We'll facilitate the process between the two parties and make sure that they're comfortable. Often we'll facilitate a call between two legal teams, and I'll sit on the call and I'll kind of chair the call and make sure that they're both comfortable and they're getting on and we can end up getting on the same page. So I found that, I have been able to build the business that I've built and have success with that without necessarily having a legal background. The one benefit I do have that maybe others in my position don't have is that my older sister is a lawyer. And so whenever there is like a really curly thing that comes up and I just need a bit of advice, I'll give Emma a call and just say, what do you think about this? So that's a bit of my secret that I can lean on.
Do you ever take a position, or Born Licensing ever take an equity position in a deal, or basically you're just paid for the work you do as a consultant?
We do get a commission sort of based on royalties and money that's paid to the licensor. So even though it's not an equity position per se, there is an upside for us. If our client has enormous success selling their product and they sell a lot more than expected, then there is an upside for us the same way there is an upside for the licensor. But it's the flip side as well. If it doesn't go as well as planned, then there isn't really an upside for us. So it's a great way to incentivize myself and the team to throw everything we can at every product launch, every single client we're working with, because if it really does well, then that benefits everybody.
Mm-hmm. Born Licensing, I believe, was established about 2014, and in 2021, it was featured in the top 100 of Financial Times FT 1000 fastest growing companies in Europe, I believe.
Yes.
What was the key to your fast track?
Yeah, well, I think the way that they measure it is they take a base year, and then a few years later, they take your current year and figure out the CAGR based on that. One of the benefits of mine was that the base year, I was really just starting up in the UK. I had started my business in Australia, moved to the UK, we set up the business in the UK, and it was kind of a very early year, and things really exploded for us. So we had 3 years of really exponential growth. And so we did go from a base year where we were just starting out to a really successful year. And I think that we grew so quickly because the demand was there. There was no one out there helping ad agencies license characters and IP in advertising. So we would go and meet with agencies and they'd be like, oh, there's finally a solution. Because previously we've been trying to reach out to the Disneys and the Warner Brothers of the world, but we don't know who to contact. We can't get through the switchboard, and we end up just kind of like giving up. So I think one of the reasons why we grew so quickly was because we provided a solution where there was previously no solution available.
Interesting. And you're probably respectful of the major licensors. You don't want to waste their time with an inappropriate offer. You kind of help save them time and aggravation, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a key part. We're always bearing in mind how under-resourced the licensors are. And we have a very clear policy of when do we actually put this in front of a licensor, because we don't want to waste their time. The truth is that if I went to Disney or Warner Brothers or Hasbro with every single time we had an inquiry, I'd be annoying them with all of these kind of opportunities. We like to work on a project, get it to a point where we think it's probably maybe got a more than 50% chance of actually happening, and then we'll bother the licensor with it. And they really respect that because they're just so busy. So they now know.
So you're like a filter for them in a way.
Yeah. And what's important is that they now know when an email comes from David Bourne, or when their phone rings and they see it's David Bourne calling, they know that I've got an exciting opportunity for them. And that's how I've tried to build the business, is know that I'm doing the work to vet it for them, and I'm only coming to you with an opportunity that I believe you'll be really interested in.
David, you recently opened Born Legal, and you have been presenting the Born to License podcast for a while now. It's an analysis of character licensing news, which I have been enjoying. I think it's really interestingly done. It's sort of a business podcast, short and to the point, and it points people in the right direction as to what's hot in that industry. It's quite interesting to me. I'm kind of a novice when it comes to character licensing, but not licensing. You're an adept podcaster, being incisive without being long-winded. How did you get involved in the podcast?
One of the things that I'm very grateful for is, before I discovered licensing, I studied at university in Australia to do commercial radio.
Oh.
And so while I was doing that, I learned all of the things that you need to do as it relates to recording, radio, editing, and all of that kind of stuff. And so I'm very lucky that I'm able to continue using those skills. I was having a think, in the last 18 months, I've been really trying to put myself out there as, more of a thought leader in the licensing space, but equally make licensing more accessible. Because the truth is, even though licensing is all around us, I said it before, licensing is everywhere, a lot of people don't understand how that Mickey Mouse t-shirt at Walmart got there. They don't understand. And so what I'm trying to do with the podcast and a bunch of different projects that I'm working on is try and really unlock the world of licensing so that people really start to understand how it works, because it is a really exciting industry. It's where entrepreneurship and, consumer products and entertainment and a lot of different sectors kind of collide in this exciting industry.
Yeah, yes, it's very exciting. Are there lessons from character licensing that can be applied to product, technology, or content licensing, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think licensing in general can be translated across every single industry. We've talked about advertising, we've talked about consumer products, but it can also be translated across tech, new technologies. Licensing is such a versatile thing that when new things come up, whether it's AI related or if it's NFTs or anything like that, when new technology, when new innovation comes through, licensing always finds its way there.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's value there are people who want it. And what people don't understand often in the patent world and the licensing world is that it costs money to license, but you make money from licensing. So if AT&T has to pay a premium for the patents on the 1-800 numbers, call center numbers that it did, or it paid a really small amount, but it added up to a lot of money. But they made money from owning that patent or having access to that patent. And same thing with a character. No, you're not doing it just for entertainment purposes. You're doing it for business purposes.
Yeah, there is so many benefits to licensing characters. I mean, if we were to focus back on consumer products for a moment, one of the conversations I have with our clients and all of our prospects is that consumers will pay more for a product, for a licensed product. They see it as premium because it is.
Right.
And so what they can actually do, yes, licensing costs money. You have to pay royalties. There's minimum guarantees involved and so forth. But a lot of consumer products companies are able to increase the price of the product just a little bit to cover those costs so that they're not kind of eating into their margin. Another thing that we talk about is that there's a lot of benefits that aren't necessarily immediately beneficial, but they're incredibly beneficial. We've got one of our clients, they're an Australian client, they're called Hippo Blue, and they do personalized products for children, and they have a Disney license. They recently signed with Warner Brothers for Batman. They recently signed with Paramount for Paw Patrol. They're having huge success. And one of the most exciting things for them is that they now see their Hippo Blue name next to Disney, next to Star Wars, next to Marvel.
Yeah.
That long-term kind of benefit to the brand goes well beyond just selling the bento boxes and drink bottles, one of which that I've got right here in front of me that I'm drinking at the moment. There's so many benefits to licensing beyond kind of like the immediate uplift of sales. It can completely transform a business.
So this brings us, we're running a little low on time, to an important question, which we sort of touched upon, you did, is artificial intelligence. Creating, recreating, manipulating other people's images, et cetera. What's your take on AI in the character licensing world currently?
Yeah, I mean, AI is moving at a pace that we are really struggling to keep up with. And it's a very sensitive topic in the licensing world. I think the licensing world is sort of starting to embrace AI in a way to help them be more efficient with their processes and so forth. But I still feel like the AI is kind of a bit of the Wild West. And there's a lot of doubt around how the licensing world can bring AI in to assist without opening a Pandora's box. And a lot of that is around kind of like entertainment, creating IP. There's so much sensitivity in Hollywood about AI and how their IP will potentially be impacted by the introduction of AI. There's a lot of sensitivity. I'm really trying to pay attention as to how AI will transform our business. It was very interesting when Disney signed a $1 billion deal with OpenAI last year, and then a month ago, it's completely backed out. So I was really keen to see like where that relationship was going to go, because it's one of those things that if in our industry, if Disney does something, it kind of gives a permission slip for everybody else to do it. And so I thought that, okay, the floodgates are open. Everybody's going to get involved with AI. And what does that mean for our business? And then that was reversed, and I'm not really quite sure the circumstances. I think that it's because OpenAI are no longer going to be offering Sora as a product. It's not their focus anymore. So we sort of go back to square one a little bit as far as like the Disneys of the world, how they're going to be embracing AI, but I will be absolutely focused and paying attention.
Yeah. It's so easy to grab images and manipulate them, and everything seems to be available for free. You know, it started with the internet, and now with AI, it seems even everything is fair use, and it's not. You know, but we can monitor it, and I think there will be more monitoring of those things in technology and characters as well. You know, it's not like the actors are saying you can't use our image. We just want to be paid for it, and we want to know when it's being done. I think that's inevitable, that images will be coveted, or brands or characters, but using them inappropriately and without compensation, I think that's really the issue. I think once they get a handle on that with technology, it'll be helpful, at least in my opinion.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges with where do we go with AI, because these licensors and brand owners are so protective of their IP. A brand like Marvel, for example, we know that Disney purchased Marvel for $4 billion. It's worth so much more than that. And so they have so many processes in place to make sure that nobody is using their IP in a way that could be detrimental to the brand. But when you start to introduce AI, how do you put parameters in place? That's the question for licensors, is can we work with AI while still protecting our brand, while still making sure that there are parameters in which our characters can appear so that they don't do anything that will offend people and that will potentially ruin the brand.
Right. Or undermine it in any way. Yes, or devalue it. Yeah, and I think transparency has a lot to do with it. There's a content authenticity initiative headed by Adobe, but there are a number of major content creators and distributors involved in it. But they're embedding in images, photographs that are taken, sort of a watermark, for lack of a better term, but it can't be removed. But you can monitor and track those images across its lifespan and kind of know who's using it and if you're being compensated if you're using it inappropriately. I think we'll see more of that kind of technology apply to various levels of AI. People want to know what's going on, and currently we don't know too much with AI. We like to ask David, what was your first awareness of IP rights? Was it positive, negative, or neutral? When were you first aware of the notion of intellectual property?
You know, I think it's a great question, because when I was a child, the day that I was born, I was given a Care Bear. And it was Swift Heart Rabbit, which is one of the Care Bear's cousins. And I was given that toy, and it was like my favorite childhood toy. And I never really knew that my favorite toy was a licensed toy. You know, I never really knew that there were so many other versions of that character and that it was from a TV show until I was much older. I think it was when I was, much older, I realized that toy was actually from a TV show and so forth. And I think that's when something sort of clicked a little bit, that there was this IP, this world of IP that existed that I didn't realize. But it all really came together when I was sitting down in that interview in my first licensing role, and they started to explain to me what licensing was. I think it all really started to click. I thought back to my childhood toy, that it was a Care Bear, that it was also on a TV show. Oh, okay, so that's licensing. So I feel like it took me that long to kind of get my head around what IP was all about.
Sure. What thought would you like to leave our listeners and viewers with today?
Well, I think one of the things, I've said it many times, is that licensing is everywhere. And I always encourage people to have a look around in their house, and they'll be so surprised as to how quickly they find something that is licensed. whether it's, maybe going to their supermarket or so forth, just have a look around. You'll be so surprised at how prominent licensing is, because once you realize that licensing is all around us, you really can't avoid it. It's absolutely everywhere.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. I saw your agenda in the email return, and I don't know how you do it. You're going to be in several different continents in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I do love to travel, both for business and for leisure. Yeah, if I'm in the same place for longer than a month, I start to get bored, to be honest.
Well, thanks for taking time for us. And I learned a lot, and I think our listeners did as well. Thank you. We'll have to have you back on again in the future.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, looking forward to speaking with you again soon.
Hello, I'm Bruce Berman, the host of Understanding IP Matters, the critically acclaimed series that provides leading innovators and experts the space to share their IP story, the good, the bad, and the incredible. Understanding IP Matters is brought to you by the nonprofit Center for Intellectual Property Understanding, with the generous support of its partners and sponsors. Subscribe on the platform of your choice or email us at explore@understandingip.org. Content provided is for informational purposes only and does not represent the views of CIPU or its affiliates. This episode was produced for CIPU by Podsonic. Thank you for listening.